Jude sprinted down the sterile white hallway, his heart hammering against his ribs. His daughter, Poppy, was burning up with a dangerously high fever, and he needed to find a nurse immediately. Blinded by panic, he took a sharp left turn and burst into room 302 instead of 305. Inside, the room was dim, filled only with the slow, rhythmic beeping of life support machines. On the bed lay an elderly woman, Celeste, taking shallow, ragged breaths. At the sound of the door, her heavy eyelids fluttered open. When she saw Jude standing in the doorway, backlit by the hall lights, her eyes suddenly widened with recognition. She summoned every ounce of her remaining strength and reached out a trembling hand. "Arthur," she gasped, her voice fragile as glass. "Is that you? You came back for me?" Jude stepped forward to apologize, but she lunged and grabbed his wrist with a desperate iron grip. She pulled him close, tears streaming down her wrinkled cheeks. "Do not go," she whispered urgently. "You must find the box under the old oak tree. Promise me. Do not let him take it. Before we find out what is inside that secret box, let us know where you are watching from in the world in the comments. We love connecting with fans from all over the world. And if you believe that everything happens for a reason, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel right now." Jude stood frozen by the hospital bed, the rhythmic beep of the heart monitor ticking away the final seconds of a long, lonely life. He looked down at his worn-out sneakers, and then at the fine silk sheets covering the dying woman. He was a man drowning in the rough currents of life. His daughter, Poppy, was lying in a generic room down the hall with a fever that refused to break, and his wallet contained exactly 3 crumpled dollar bills. He was tired. He was hungry. He was terrified of what the morning would bring. He knew he should pull his hand away. He knew he should call the nurse, explain the error, and run back to his daughter. He was in room 302, not 305. This was a mistake. But Jude possessed a heart that was too soft for this hard world. He looked at the desperation in the woman's eyes. It was a look of pure, unadulterated loneliness. He realized in that moment that this woman, despite the private room, the expensive machines, and the VIP status, was dying completely alone. There were no flowers on the bedside table. There were no photos of grandchildren. There was just silence. "I am here," Jude whispered, his voice cracking slightly. He did not have the heart to correct her. He could not shatter the fragile illusion that was bringing her the only comfort she had left in her final hour. He slowly sank to his knees beside the bed so that he was eye level with her. He let his hand rest in hers, offering an anchor to a soul drifting out to sea. Outside in the hallway, the scene was being observed by a pair of cold, calculating eyes. Vance, the woman's distant nephew, stood leaning against the doorframe, just out of sight. He checked his heavy gold Rolex for the 5th time that hour. He was not here to comfort his aunt. He was here to act as a vulture, circling and waiting for the inevitable, so he could claim the carcass. Vance narrowed his eyes, his lip curling in a sneer. He had been waiting for Celeste to die for 5 years. She was the only barrier between him and a real estate empire worth hundreds of millions. Hearing her speak was annoying. Hearing her call out to a ghost named Arthur was pathetic. "Who is that?" Vance muttered under his breath, adjusting his silk tie. He hated that she was awake. He hated that a stranger in cheap clothes was in there holding her hand. He stepped closer to the gap in the door, his ears straining to hear every word, suspicious that she might give away a secret or change her will in a moment of delirium. Inside the room, the atmosphere was thick with a sorrow that spanned decades. Celeste raised a trembling hand and touched Jude's cheek. Her skin was like paper, dry and cool. She traced the line of his jaw, her eyes filled with a mixture of adoration and grief. "You are so warm," she breathed, her voice filled with wonder. "And you are still so young. You look exactly the way you did that summer by the lake. Do you remember, Arthur? The way the sun hit the water?" Jude did not pull away. He leaned into her touch, offering her his warmth. He saw his own reflection in her cloudy eyes, a man with messy dark hair and a strong jawline, a man who looked nothing like a billionaire, but apparently looked exactly like the man she had loved half a century ago. "I remember," Jude lied softly, his heart aching for her. "It was beautiful." "I have gotten so old, my love," Celeste wept, a single tear tracking through the deep lines of her face. "I waited for you. I waited for 50 years. Why did it take you so long to come back?" Celeste's grip on Jude's hand tightened with a sudden, surprising strength. It was the frantic energy of a soul realizing it had only seconds left to complete its mission on Earth. She pulled him closer, until his ear was hovering just inches from her lips. "Listen to me," she rasped, the words catching in her throat like dry leaves. "You must listen, Arthur. The vultures. They are waiting outside. They want everything, but they cannot have the box." Jude leaned in, his heart heavy with a sorrow he could not explain. "What box, Celeste?" he asked softly. "At the Winter Estate," she whispered, her eyes darting to the door as if she could see Vance lurking through the wood. "The old mansion on the hill. Go to the garden in the back. Find the great oak tree. The one where we carved our initials that summer. Do you remember?" She did not wait for an answer. She was racing against the fading light. "I buried it there," she continued, her voice dropping to a breathy murmur. "A wooden box. It has been there for 50 years. Inside is the truth I was too cowardly to tell you. There is a letter, Arthur. A letter I wrote the day you left, but I never had the courage to send." Her breathing hitched, a terrible, rattling sound that filled the small room. She looked deep into Jude's eyes, searching for the man she had loved half a century ago. "Promise me," she begged, tears spilling over her lashes. "Promise me you will dig it up. Promise me you will read the letter. You have to know why I did it. You have to know that I never stopped loving you, not for a single day." Jude looked at this fragile woman, hovering on the precipice of eternity. He knew he was not Arthur. He knew he was just a broke musician who had walked into the wrong room. But he also knew that he could not deny a dying woman her final wish. He could not let her die thinking she was unheard. He squeezed her hand back, firm and reassuring. "I promise," Jude said, his voice steady and solemn. "I will go to the oak tree. I will find the box, and I will read every word." A wave of relief washed over Celeste's face. The tension that had held her body rigid for decades seemed to evaporate in an instant. Her shoulders sank into the pillows. The lines of pain on her forehead smoothed out. "Thank you," she sighed, a long, releasing exhalation. "I am so tired, Arthur. But I am happy now. You came back." She closed her eyes. A small, peaceful smile touched her pale lips. "Good night, my love," she whispered. Jude held his breath. He felt the pulse in her wrist flutter once, twice, and then stop. The grip on his hand went slack. Beep! The heart monitor let out a single, high-pitched tone that sliced through the silence of the room. The green line on the screen went flat. Jude sat there for a moment, head bowed, holding the hand of a stranger who had made him feel like family. He felt a profound sense of loss, a heavy weight settling in his chest. He gently placed her hand down on the sheet and reached up to close her eyes. "Rest in peace, Celeste," he murmured. Bang! The door to the hospital room flew open, slamming against the wall with violent force. Vance stormed in, his face twisted in a mask of performative outrage that did not quite cover his greed. He looked at the flat line on the monitor, and for a split second, a look of triumph flashed in his eyes before he composed himself into fake grief. He turned his glare on Jude. "What did you do?" Vance shouted, pointing a manicured finger at Jude's chest. "Who are you? What did you do to my aunt?" Jude stood up slowly, wiping a stray tear from his cheek. "She just passed away. I was just—" "You were bothering her!" Vance spat, advancing on him. "I saw you. You were whispering in her ear, trying to manipulate a dying woman. Did you get her to sign something? Did you steal her jewelry?" Vance grabbed Jude by the collar of his worn-out jacket and shoved him backward toward the door. "Get out!" Vance screamed. "Get out before I call the police and have you arrested for trespassing. This is a private room for family only, you filth." Jude did not fight back. He looked at Vance with calm, pitying eyes. He adjusted his jacket, took one last look at the peaceful face of Celeste, and stepped out into the hallway. He walked back toward the nurse's station to find help for his daughter, Poppy. But as he walked, the weight of the promise he had made pressed down on him. He could still feel the ghost of Celeste's grip on his hand. The winter estate, the old oak tree, the letter. He was just a stranger. He should just walk away and forget it. But Jude was a man of his word, and he had the strangest feeling that his life had just changed forever. That nephew is definitely hiding something. He does not look sad at all. He looks greedy. Jude could just walk away and forget about the crazy old lady. After all, he has his own sick daughter to worry about. But he made a solemn promise to a dying soul, and Jude is a man of his word. What is in that box that is so important? I have a feeling it is going to change everything. Keep watching. 2 days later, the fever that had gripped little Poppy finally broke. Jude sat by her bedside in their small, drafty apartment, watching her chest rise and fall in the peaceful rhythm of deep sleep. She was safe. But Jude was not at peace. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the face of the dying woman. He felt the phantom pressure of her hand gripping his. He heard her desperate plea echoing in the silence of his kitchen. The winter estate. The old oak tree. The box. He tried to tell himself it was just the rambling of a confused mind. He tried to focus on his overdue rent and the empty refrigerator. But the promise he had made felt like a physical weight, a debt that needed to be paid before he could move forward. "I have to go," Jude whispered to the empty room. He asked his neighbor, Mrs. Gable, to watch Poppy for a few hours. Then he climbed into his rusted sedan and drove toward the wealthy district on the edge of town. The Winter Estate was a place of local legend. It was a sprawling, Gothic mansion that sat atop a hill, surrounded by iron gates and overgrown ivy. It had been empty for years, waiting for its owner to return, and now, waiting for the vultures to pick it apart. When Jude arrived, he saw the bright orange, "No Trespassing" signs plastered on the front gates, likely placed there by Vance. A heavy chain secured the entrance. Jude drove around to the back perimeter, where the stone wall had crumbled years ago. He parked his car in the shadows of the woods and slipped through the gap. The grounds were wild and untamed. Weeds choked the rose bushes, and the statues were covered in green moss. It was a garden that had been mourning its mistress for a very long time. Jude navigated through the knee-high grass, searching for the landmark Celeste had described, the great oak tree. He found it near the edge of a dried-up ornamental pond. It was massive, its gnarled branches stretching out like the arms of a giant protecting a secret. The bark was thick and ancient. Jude walked up to the trunk and brushed away the moss. There, barely visible after decades of weathering, were 2 initials carved into the wood inside a heart, a +C, Arthur and Celeste. She was telling the truth, Jude breathed. He looked around. The estate was silent, save for the wind whistling through the dead leaves. He knelt down at the base of the tree, directly beneath the carving. He did not have a shovel, so he used a tire iron he had brought from his car. He stabbed the earth. The ground was hard, packed tight by 50 winters. He dug. He struck a rock. He dug again. Sweat dripped down his nose, stinging his eyes. His hands, usually delicate enough to play complex guitar chords, were now covered in mud and grime. 10 minutes passed, then 20. He was beginning to feel foolish. Maybe he was crazy. Maybe there was nothing here but dirt and worms. Thunk. The tire iron hit something solid. It was not the sharp sound of a rock, but the hollow, dull thud of wood. Jude's heart leaped. He dropped the tool and began to dig frantically with his bare hands, clawing at the soil like a man possessed. He brushed away the loose dirt until he revealed the lid of a small wooden chest. It was rotting, the metal hinges rusted shut, but it was there. He pulled it out of the hole, groaning with the effort. He sat back on his heels, panting, the box resting on his lap. It smelled of damp earth and lost time. "Okay, Celeste," Jude whispered. "Let us see what you wanted me to find." He used the tire iron to pry the rusted lock. With a groan of protesting metal, the lid creaked open. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth to protect them from the moisture, were bundles of letters tied with faded blue ribbon. Dozens of them. Jude carefully lifted the top bundle. The paper was yellow and brittle. The handwriting was elegant, looping script. He set the letters aside for a moment. Beneath them lay a single photograph, face down. Jude picked it up. His hands were trembling. He slowly turned it over. It was a black and white photograph, the edges curled with age. It showed a young man standing by a lake, laughing. He was holding a guitar, his hair messy, his smile crooked and charming. On the back of the photo, written in blue ink, were the words, "Arthur, summer of 1970, my eternal love." Jude stared at the face in the photo. The breath left his lungs in a rush. The world around him seemed to spin. He was looking at himself. The man in the photo had the exact same eyes as Jude. He had the same nose, the same jawline. Even the way he held the guitar was identical to the way Jude held his. It was like looking into a mirror that reflected the past. Jude dropped the photo onto the grass. His mind was racing, connecting dots he had never known existed. His father had been an orphan. He had grown up in the state system, never knowing who his parents were. He had died young, leaving Jude with nothing but a few stories and a silver locket he had been found with. A locket Jude still kept in his guitar case. Jude scrambled to pick up the photo again. He held it up next to his own face, though there was no one there to see the resemblance. "Arthur," Jude whispered, his voice shaking. "My father's name was Arthur Jr." The realization hit him with the force of a freight train. The dying woman in the hospital room, the woman who had held his hand and looked at him with such love. She had not been mistaken. She had seen the resemblance because it was real. She was not just a stranger. She was his grandmother. And the man in the photo, Arthur, was the grandfather Jude had never known. Jude sat there under the old oak tree, holding the proof of his history in his dirty hands. Tears welled up in his eyes, hot and fast. He had walked into that hospital room by accident, but destiny had guided his steps. He had held his grandmother's hand as she died, and he had not even known it. Suddenly, the crunch of dry leaves broke the silence. "Well, well," a voice sneered from behind him. "I knew you were up to something, you little rat." Jude spun around. Vance was standing there, a smirk on his face and a security guard flanking him. He was holding a shovel in one hand, looking at the open box on Jude's lap with greedy, hungry eyes. Vance stepped closer, his expensive Italian leather shoes crunching on the dead leaves. He signaled the security guard to hang back, wanting to claim the prize himself. "Hand it over," Vance commanded, extending a greedy palm. "My aunt was senile, but she was rich. I knew she hid a stash of diamonds or bonds somewhere on this property. I have been tearing the house apart looking for it." Jude ignored him. His attention was consumed by the letter trembling in his hands. He unfolded the brittle paper, the ink faded but legible. It was dated 50 years ago. "My dearest Arthur, if you are reading this, then my father has won. He forced me to make the most terrible choice of my life. To save your reputation and your future, I had to give him up. Our son, our beautiful baby boy. They took him to St. Mary's orphanage this morning. I begged them to let me keep him, but they refused. I named him Arthur, after the only man I will ever love. I gave him the silver locket with my name inside, so that one day he might find his way back to me. I will spend every day of my life searching for him, and I will spend every day loving you. Yours forever, Celeste." Jude felt the air leave his lungs. He reached into his own shirt and pulled out the tarnished silver locket that he wore around his neck every single day. It was the only thing his father had left him. He clicked it open. Inside, engraved in delicate script, was the name, Celeste. The pieces of the puzzle slammed together with a deafening clarity. His father, Arthur, had grown up in that orphanage. He had spent his whole life wondering why he had been abandoned. He had died never knowing that his mother was a billionaire who had loved him from afar, trapped in her own golden cage. Jude looked up at Vance, his eyes burning with a sudden, fierce intensity. "It is not diamonds," Jude said, his voice low and dangerous. "It is her heart. It is the proof that she had a son." Vance laughed, a cruel, barking sound. "A son! Aunt Celeste was a spinster. She never had children. Now give me the box before I have you beaten for trespassing." Vance lunged forward, grabbing the edge of the wooden box. "Give it to me!" "No!" Jude shouted, yanking it back. "It does not belong to you!" They grappled in the dirt. Vance, fueled by greed, was surprisingly strong. He managed to kick the box, sending the letters scattering across the grass. He raised his fist to strike Jude. "Stop right there!" A booming voice echoed across the garden. Vance froze, his fist midair. Jude looked up, panting. A silver sedan had pulled up on the gravel drive. An elderly man in a sharp gray suit stepped out, flanked by 2 police officers. It was Mr. Sterling, Celeste's personal attorney and closest confidant. "Mr. Sterling?" Vance stammered, straightening his tie. "Thank goodness you are here. This intruder, he dug up my aunt's property. He is trying to steal family heirlooms." Mr. Sterling walked past Vance as if he were invisible. He stopped in front of Jude, who was kneeling on the ground gathering the scattered letters. The lawyer looked at Jude's face, at the eyes that mirrored the portrait of Arthur, and softened. "He is not stealing anything, Mr. Vance," Mr. Sterling said calmly. "He is simply claiming what is rightfully his." "What are you talking about?" Vance demanded. "I am the heir. I am the only family left." Mr. Sterling reached into his briefcase and pulled out a sealed document. "Actually, you are not. Celeste knew her end was near. She instructed me to watch over her room. When this young man entered room 302 by mistake, she activated a silent alarm to summon me. She told me he was Arthur. I thought it was dementia, but I followed her instructions." The lawyer turned to Jude. "When you left the room to find a nurse, I entered. I took the hair sample you left on her pillowcase. I ran an expedited DNA test against the sample Celeste kept on file for 50 years. A lock of hair from the baby she gave up." Mr. Sterling held up the paper. "The results came back this morning. It is a 100% match for familial lineage. This man's father was Celeste's son, which makes Jude her biological grandson." Vance's face went white. He staggered back, shaking his head. That is impossible. It is a con." "It is science," Mr. Sterling declared. "And according to Celeste's final will and testament, executed the moment her grandson was found, you are entitled to nothing. The entire estate, the fortune, and the legacy. It all belongs to him." Mr. Sterling gestured to Jude. "Welcome home, Mr. Jude." The garden fell silent as the police officers stepped forward. Vance, realizing his gamble had failed, tried to protest, but his words were empty noise against the weight of the truth. He was escorted off the property, his dreams of unearned wealth dissolving into the evening air, leaving Jude standing alone with Mr. Sterling under the canopy of the great oak tree. Mr. Sterling handed Jude a heavy iron key. It was cold and rusted, but to Jude, it felt like the warmest thing in the world. "She wanted you to have this," the lawyer said softly. "She wanted you to bring life back to this place." Jude looked at the crumbling mansion, then at the box of letters in his arms, and finally at the locket around his neck. He was no longer just a struggling musician with $3 in his pocket. He was a grandson. He was an heir. He was home. The first thing Jude did with his inheritance was not to buy a sports car or a yacht. He went straight back to the hospital. He moved Poppy to the best pediatric wing in the city. He hired the top specialists, paying every cent up front. Within a week, the fever that had threatened to take his daughter away was gone, replaced by the rosy cheeks and bright laughter of a healthy child. But Jude did not stop there. He remembered the pain in his father's eyes when he spoke about growing up alone in the system. He remembered the letter Celeste had written, detailing her 50 years of regret. 6 months later, The iron gates of the winter estate were thrown open. The no trespassing signs were gone, replaced by a beautiful bronze plaque that read, "The Celeste and Arthur Foundation." Jude had transformed the mansion into a sanctuary. It was no longer a tomb for ghosts. It was a home for orphans who had aged out of the foster care system. Young men and women who, like his father, had nowhere else to go. He gave them scholarships, music lessons, and most importantly, a family. On a crisp autumn afternoon, Jude stood in the garden by the great oak tree. The weeds were gone, replaced by blooming white roses. Poppy was running across the grass, chasing a golden retriever, her laughter ringing out like a bell. Jude knelt down and placed a fresh bouquet of lilies on a new marble headstone that lay at the foot of the tree. It bore two names, Celeste and Arthur, reunited in eternity. He touched the cold stone, feeling a warmth that defied the season. He pulled the silver locket from his shirt, holding it tight against his heart. "I read the letters," Jude whispered to the wind rustling through the leaves. "I read every single one, and I promise you will never be lonely again. Sleep well, Grandma." A single leaf drifted down from the oak tree and landed on his shoulder, gentle as a grandmother's touch. Fate does not make mistakes. Jude thought he walked into the wrong room, but it turned out to be the only right place in the world. He gave his grandmother peace in her final moments without even knowing who she was. This story proves that love leaves echoes through generations, and sometimes the people we help are the ones who save us in return. Have you ever felt an unexplainable connection to a stranger? Tell me your story in the comments below. Do not forget to subscribe and hit that like button. See you next time.